Hi, my name is Wayne Gamillion, producer and founder of Urban Sound Station Television. This program is sponsored by Manhattan Investigations and Manhattan Adult Services. This year's Black History theme is We Are One. Although I'm not a peace officer by profession, it is an honor for me to join the Department of Probation in celebrating Black History Month 2014. And with this, I welcome you all to join the Manhattan Investigations Manhattan Adult Services in presenting its first annual Black History Month celebration, reflecting on our struggle and history as a people both in the U.S. and abroad. I think you'll find this program both insightful, educational, and intellectually stimulating. Enjoy.
So clearly, Black History Month was created to recognize the important contributions of so many Black Americans, whether born as a slave or as a free person, throughout 300 years of colonial times and of the new nation.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
So in 1926, some 87 years ago, Dr. Carter first proclaimed Negro History Week. So as we fast forward, by the late 1960s, the civil rights movement of the South was really playing second fiddle to the Black Power political movement and the Black is Beautiful cultural movement that had arisen throughout the North and in major urban centers throughout the rest of the country. I can remember growing up as a teenager in East Harlem, in El Barrio, and experiencing the political fervor and pride of that time as a new generation of young activist African Americans, influenced in large part by the nationalist and Pan-Africanist perspectives of individuals like Malcolm X and Frantz Fanon, Aimé Césaire, and as was mentioned earlier, Kwame Nkrumah, and organizations like the Black Panthers and SNCC, which embrace with pride their blackness and with time their African heritage, while committing at the same time to the struggle for political empowerment. Among many of these generation, many declared solidarity with what was being discussed by our prior speaker, which were the liberation struggles in Africa and with other revolutionary and social struggles throughout Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And as your speaker noted, back then the term used was the Third World. In the midst of this fervor, Negro History Week in most large urban centers had largely been transformed into Black History Month, and it would take the elected leaders of our nation another decade before President Ford in '76, some 37 years ago, would officially proclaim Black History Month. In 1964, the Harlem Riots occurred, which was the first of the large-scale 1960 riots, which was later followed by what I am sure many of our younger colleagues here have probably studied in college, which was the Watts riots in 1965. But in '64, Uptown was an armed camp. Not too different from the pictures we have witnessed throughout the Arab Spring, or most recently in Thailand, Ukraine, or yesterday in Venezuela. As Harlem blows up, my guidance counselor reads an article in the Times about a gathering of some of the city's private and most selective schools that had decided to create scholarships as their way to make a difference in the lives of what we were then called underprivileged and culturally deprived minority kids. I was one of them. And the phrase inner city kids, that didn't even exist at that time. So our Jewish guidance counselor, working with our African American science teacher, identified the top students at my school, and a group of us applied to these schools. The 5 of us, 2 African Americans, 1 Virgin Islander, and 2 Puerto Ricans, traveled beyond East Harlem to study at these schools. I ended up at the Dalton School. So I was a direct beneficiary of these struggles. By the way, I was again to benefit from these social movements when I was part of the first generation of minority ghetto kids being admitted to Ivy League schools. You see, I ended up at Yale.
Yes.
Now, before the 1960s, the Daltons and Yales of our nation had always had a small number of students of color. But most, if truth be told, were the children of the elite from Africa, from Asia and Latin America, with once in a while an occasional child of a prominent American black. So of what relevance is any of this history to today's celebration? Well, I believe it is important that we understand our history, because if we don't, then we run the risk of losing the heart and the soul of this important celebration. When I met with P.O. Bridgewater and P.O. Smith to find out the theme of the event, I was truly pleased to hear the response of "We are one," and that they were committed to structuring the event in a way that it would have meaning and not just be a party. Nothing wrong with a party, but we gotta keep it, we have to be clear. So let me now address the theme of "We are one." By the way, this year's National African American History Month's official theme is Civil Rights in America. But as I stated, the organizers felt compelled to celebrate "We are one." So clearly, Black History Month was created to recognize the important contributions of so many Black Americans, whether born as a slave or as a free person, throughout 300 years of colonial times and of the new nation. I can recall that as an elementary school student, black faces were extremely rare in the official textbooks. Maybe of even greater import was the fact that outside of sports and music, black faces were close to invisible. Allow me to share another story. The year was 1968. Martin Luther King had been murdered in April. Bobby Kennedy was killed in June. And as the new September TV lineup was announced, I can still recall the excitement that was generated when we learned that Diane Carroll was going to have the lead role as Julia in a TV series playing the role of a nurse who was also a single black mom. Trust me when I tell you that at least in New York City, every black and Puerto Rican family was glued to their television set as this monumental event was about to take place. By the way, all of the rest of America reacted too, because Julia was one of the top 10 TV series watched that year. So from Julia in 68, let's flip the numbers, to Oprah in 86, or from King's assassination in 68, to Obama's election in 08. The progress has been nothing short of monumental. So this, and Chita also. You can tell the Latinos are in the house. All right. So it is very important that we always remember that history and that we pay tribute to our African American brothers and sisters whose enslaved ancestors, as well as the much smaller percentage of ancestors that were free persons, that these ancestors were such an important part of this nation's development. And we should always pay tribute to those that during the struggles of the 50s and the 60s put everything on the front line, including their lives, to democratize our nation. These struggles are directly related to the space that has been created and the opportunities that so many of us enjoy. And all of America should always pay tribute to that history because it is an integral part of the nation's history. But today we find ourselves in the 21st century. And the idea of "we are one" is a call to celebrate the diversity, the richness that today defines the blackness of our nation. First, as we lawyers are prone to say, the historical record must be made complete. And therefore, we must give credit to the sons and the daughters of the African diaspora that came from other lands. Many of you may very well have come from those lands and that have at one point or another landed on these shores, or whose children that have been raised on these shores have made significant contributions to Black American history. whether it be the venerable Pierre Toussaint, a Haitian born in slavery who becomes a prominent New Yorker during the late 1790s and 1800s, and who may eventually be canonized as the first Roman Catholic African American saint. Or whether it be Arturo Alfonso, and yes, that was his name, Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, a Puerto Rican, who becomes a New Yorker in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and who compiles the largest collection of books and articles on people of African descent, and whose private collection becomes the foundation for the Schomburg Library up in Harlem. By the way, Schomburg co-founded the Negro Society for Historical Research a few years actually before Dr. Goodson founded his association. Or whether it be Marcus Garvey, a prominent advocate of the Black Back to Africa movement, who was a Jamaican who spent a decade in Harlem before he was deported. Or whether it be Harlem's own Harold George Belafonte Jr., better known by most of us as Harry Belafonte, a son of a Jamaican mother and a Martinican dad, who, according to Wikipedia, for what that's worth, is one of the most successful African-American pop stars in history. But to many of us, Belafonte is even more. For over 50 years, he has been one of the nation's leading civil rights activists. He was there over 50 years ago with Dr. King, and at his old age, he still says presente today. Or whether it be Basil Alexander Patterson, son of a Jamaican mother, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, a karaoke father, who's an integral part of the Wrangell, Sutton, Dinkins, Patterson, Harlem, and Manhattan leadership, and the father of New York State's first African-American governor. Or whether it be, and I know he's somewhat controversial, or whether it be the Bronx own Louis Eugene Walcott, son of a mother from St. Kitts and a father from Jamaica, but who really grew up with his Barbadian stepdad, who is better known today as Minister Louis Farrakhan. Or whether it be East Harlem's own Malta Moreno Vega, daughter of Puerto Rican parents and the founder and longtime driving force behind the Franklin H. Williams Caribbean Cultural Center Diaspora Institute in New York City. Or whether it be Harlem born, but the Bronx can claim him, Bronx raised Colin Powell, the first four-star African-American general, the son of Jamaican parents. Or whether it be a certain young lady by the name of Onika Tanya Mirage, Queen's own pop star, Nicki Minaj, who was born in Trinidad and Tobago. Or whether it be the Bronx's Eric Hampton Holder Jr., the nation's Attorney General, whose father was from Barbados, and his grandparents on his mother's side were also Barbadians. Two, of course, last but not least, our president, who is the son of a Kenyan father, and as we all know, a mother from Kansas. These are but a few examples which demonstrate how the sons and daughters of the remainder of the African diaspora beyond our shores have contributed significantly and been embedded in the heart of African American history. So I'm going to keep it with my stories. Let's go with Adam Clayton Powell Jr., a past pastor of Harlem's Abyssinian Church. This is more on the gossipy side. And in his time, the most powerful African-American elected official, who was eventually challenged by Charles Wrangell, the son of an African-American mother and a Puerto Rican father. Now, I still remember watching the Puerto Rican Day Parade as a little boy on television, and my dad making it sure that I knew that Charlie Wrangell was part Puerto Rican. No, as he would say, that Ranheads from Ponce. So Charlie grew up culturally, since his father wasn't there, obviously grew up culturally more identified with his mother's heritage. And as fate would have it, Adam Clayton Powell IV, Powell's son, would eventually challenge, without success, Congressman Wrangell. Except that Adam's mother was the Puerto Rican, and he grew up in Puerto Rico, and since his father wasn't there, basically identified stronger with his mother's heritage. And then when the Dominican, Adriano Espaillat, challenged Congressman Rangel, Adam IV throws his support behind Congressman Rangel. The two half black and two half Puerto Ricans are now both on the same side. Now, as a disclaimer, I should mention that Congressman Rangel has been my congressman for most of my life, that Adam was my city council member and state assembly member, and that both have been extremely strong supporters of my candidacy in the past. So today, as the makeup of our society becomes more diverse than ever, and I'm sure many of you are following what the projections are, that before the middle of this century, what we will have is a plurality of people of European descent. It will no longer be a majority because of the increase in the Latino, African descent people and Asian descent people in this country. And here, that diversity is already reflected in New York, where about foreign-born blacks constitute somewhere between 1/3 and 40% of the overall black population in our town. Given those changes, it is truly important that while we need to recognize, respect, and celebrate our own unique cultural history, we should also celebrate the themes common to all of us that share in the heritage of the African diaspora, and to identify common ground, if for no other reason, the well-being of all of our children, who, whether you like it or not, are going to continue to intermarry and continue to add and to redefine blackness throughout the rest of this century. So, how do we bring this all home to the Department of Probation and our role within the criminal and juvenile justice systems? I think it is a fair statement that each and every one of us is called to carry the mantle forward. To those of us who are faith-based and inspired, whether we be Christians, Muslims, Hindus, or Jews, the scriptures of all the world's great religions call us to care for the other. And to those of us who are not faith-based, but who claim to be socially conscious, or who have the freedom today to parade our pride, I would hope that we will be called to give back, to make a difference. Or for those of you who are in my age group who might just remember the talk show host, Merv Griffin, who, by the way, was not of color, once again in 1968 took his show up to Harlem and asked his viewers to give a damn. Okay, so today's focus obviously has been on the achievement and the progress that has taken place over the last half a century. But I need not inform you of the crisis that exists among too many of our young inner city black males. By the way, I would add to that, even though that's not the focus of the newspaper articles, that the Northeast Mid-Atlantic inner city Puerto Ricans are in the same boat, that the Northeast young Dominican men are coming right into the fold. And if we were out in the West Coast, the conversation would be about the young Mexican-American males. And if true be told, there is an awareness that is growing that poses the question whether America today has a crisis with our males, period. But whether the worst manifestation of that, unfortunately, is in our community. And some of these articles have begun to make the front page of the Times, for whatever that's worth. So, I think we're called to serve as role models for these young people, most especially for the young people of color, but really for all, so that they can see that we are as capable as anyone else that serves in this important position, and that they should strive to be someone in the future. Sometimes that means having to respond above and beyond, as I have had the pleasure of watching some of you, like Probation Officer Bridgewater with Robert Renz, who, by the way, was not a young man of color, but boy, did he ever go above and beyond with that case. Or as Probation Officer Seeley does, oftentimes in my courtroom, taking extra time to speak to some of these young people. Or as some of you who are responsible for writing those reports, especially for my young people, who go above and beyond to give me as much information so I can hopefully try to make an intelligent decision. I know that this may be asking much of us, but when I feel overwhelmed, I sit back and say to myself, I think I got it hard. I cannot imagine what it must have been like for those who look like me 150 years ago. So calm down and let's take care of business. You know? So we are called not just to do our jobs, but to bring forth our knowledge and our experiences in helping to shape the department's policies and to advocate for change whenever necessary. You never know when that seed will bear fruit. And I'll leave you with the final story of the afternoon. You see, there once was a very troubled young man, but a smart young man, who was nothing more than a minor criminal, not unlike many of the young people you supervise. Then that young man ended up in jail. He found his history, he found his bearings while in prison, and he found faith and became one of the most important and powerful African American individuals of the 20th century. Malcolm X, later known as El Haj Malik al-Shabazz, like many activists of his time, stressed the importance of knowing your history. But what often separated Malcolm from many was his internationalist perspective, his Pan-Africanist perspective. He advocated the use of the term African American when Black America had just woken up to embracing their blackness and was moving to adopt the term of black to self-describe as opposed to Negro or colored. And interestingly enough, while he's been gone from the planet, some say he's around in other forms, today we gather to celebrate what has officially become known as National African American History Month. And we gather here to celebrate that from all the walks of the African diaspora, we are one. So I pray that each of you either has found your voice or may one day find your voice, and that on your personal journey, you might serve to be the catalyst that redirects a troubled young boy's or young girl's life. That you may enjoy a glorious retirement, knowing you made a difference in the life of our young people. Thank you again for the honor of addressing you today.
Chariot coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot coming for to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming for to carry me home. Tell all my friends I'm coming to, coming for to carry me home.
Hey!
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
Sometimes the question has been raised about why black men fight and have fought for this country. It is the black man's implacable will to be free that makes him fight for this country. And it is that same will that will make him fight this country.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
I'm the son of a black man from Kenya and a white woman from Kansas. I am married to a black American who carries within her the blood of slaves and slave owners, an inheritance we pass on to our two precious daughters. I have brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, uncles, and cousins of every race and every hue scattered across 3 continents, and for as long as I live, I will never forget that in no other country on earth is my story even possible.